To the extent that populations are being increasingly dependent, virtually enslaved, to drugs, called drug dependencies, the politics, policies, and profiteering of pharmaceutical firms and those who run them is genocidal. Most people realize that wars of any kind make money for arms dealers, industry manufacturers, and stocks, bonds, and futures investors. The wars against infectious diseases and cancers is no different. The war on cancer, the war on AIDS, the battle against breast and prostate malignancies, colon cancers, children's tumors, diabetes, and heart diseases is no different. Many industries and officials thrive off of this sickness. Could all of these declared wars, including the war on terrorism and medically frightening bioterrorism, be part of an economic and political ploy by inside traders or un-American traitors, wielding the mass media for deception? Let's see. In 1963, as the plot to assassinate President John F. Kennedy was being hatched, a global policy think tank met at Iron Mountain near Hudson, New York to discuss the possibilities for economic sustainability in a world without war. You may have heard it said that money makes the world go round. Well, most intelligent people knew at that time that war economies kept bankers and businessmen most profitable. So the big question asked and answered in the report from Iron Mountain on the desirability and possibility of peace regarded the possibility of transitioning into the 21st century, keeping growing populations manageable and large corporations in business. The participants at Iron Mountain considered the functions of war as necessary for political, economic, and social progress. The functions of war, they wrote, are, quote, essential to the survival of social systems we know today, end quote. Under political requirements, the report stated, quote, a viable political substitute for war must posit a generalized external menace to each society of a nature and degree sufficient to require the organization and acceptance of political authority, end quote. In other words, a form of controlled life with threats other than large-scale devastating wars was considered. A way to control populations without destroying expensive infrastructures, roads, utilities, and real estate, as in past world wars. This report provided economic substitutes for war and suggested developing a comprehensive social welfare program and a giant open-ended space research program, both of which we have today. Political substitutes for war included, quote, an omnipresent, virtually omnipotent international police force, end quote. The current global war on terrorism assures this. And fictitious alternate enemies, about which this documentary speaks, is evident in today's focus on terrorism. But who are the deadliest terrorists, really? Do contemporary terrorists seek social control through a, quote, modern, sophisticated form of slavery? Ecological bioterrorism and human genetic destruction was also recommended by the report from Iron Mountain think tank. They suggested a, quote, comprehensive program of applied eugenics, end quote. That means genetically culling and killing perceived social misfits or having them die from environmental toxicity. And the report's cultural replacements in science included, besides space research and social welfare, this concept of eugenic genetic control. In essence, these policy analysts, representing global industrialists, concluded that viable alternatives to traditional warfare could be made available to keep the world's economies going and the burgeoning populations controlled.
It might come as a shock to many people, but the form of government we have in this country today basically is socialistic. We have social programs for everything. We have educational programs to bring the curriculum around to what the national education authorities want. And basically, we have a socialist program, but instead of the benefits going to the people, the benefits go to the corporations. Okay? So I think anyone that stops and looks at it would agree that we have socialism geared to benefit the multinational corporations. Now, interestingly enough, this is pushed along by a fervent nationalism. What's good for GM is good for the country. Okay? And our country, right or wrong. And we're going to go take our form of freedom and democracy to some other country. If you don't like it, we'll just invade you and occupy you. Okay? Now, what does that tell us? That tells us that the form of government that we're operating under today is National Socialism. And that should come as a shock to many people, particularly when you consider that National Socialism in German, shortened down, means Nazi. So, because the Nazi Party was the National Socialist German Workers' Party, National Socialist Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, okay? And so they shortened it to Nazis. And by the way, that was a form of fascism, okay? And the man who coined the term fascism was Benito Mussolini in Italy. But Benito Mussolini himself said that fascism really wasn't the proper term, that it more correctly should have been called corporatism. And that is simply when you have the corporations running the country and controlling the government. Now, this is what we saw in fascist Italy, this is what we saw in Nazi Germany, but the difference is this. In those countries, but before World War II, the state took over the corporations. In the United States today, the corporations have taken over the state, but the end result's the same.
Consistent with the report from Iron Mountain, U.S. government records show a definitive genetics, eugenics, depopulation campaign was well underway by the early 1970s. Here, for instance, is a copy of a National Security Memorandum 200, which called for massive Third World depopulation. This was compiled by request of America's nuclear weapons guru, Dr. Henry Kissinger, the U.S. National Security Advisor under Richard Nixon, overseeing CIA, FBI, and foreign policy.
I want this explained to me now. My Jew boy, Haldeman, where the hell's my Jew boy? Bob!
He's here, Mr. President. I put in a call to him as soon as State sent us that signal.
Thank you. Henry, just what the hell is this?
That evidently the State Department has been eavesdropping.
And a good thing, too. How else would I ever hear about what it is you're actually doing around here?
Mr. President, I would never keep anything from you.
Surely the day-to-day details of how I achieved the policy. Henry, we can't have the receivers calling plays the quarterback doesn't know. Is this signal correct?
Well, you see, this is the point, Mr. President. We cannot truly say. Not at the moment.
Yes, I can see that, but you know how I hate it when State needles me about you running a secret foreign policy and cutting them out.
Yes, I do, Mr. President. I do.